What is up, all you GBA type people? This is Tom, and we're here again bringing you the Week 3 Power Rankings. With me, as always,
What is going on, everyone? My name is Under the Radar.
aka Kelly. Gonna do it every week.
God damn it.
So, one thing we want to talk about, it seems that our rankings last week, as well as a lot of the matches, were adversely affected by the holidays, most of us living here in the United States. That might have been kind of a factor in terms of their matches that we all saw on Sunday, and we apologize last week for whatever mistakes we might have made, but bear with us. This week you're going to notice that the rankings between Kelly and I are roughly the same. It's outside of maybe 6 placements, we're pretty much going to be going through all the way up roughly the same, right, Kelly?
Yep, about that.
So, leading off, we have the Cincinnati Loud Reds. I guess he has editing issues or whatever, what have you. But we have not watched his side yet, so we don't really have much to talk about. But, Kelly, you want to play a game?
Yeah.
Okay, the game is, can you tell me what Mon he didn't bring in Week 3 that he has brought in Week 1 and 2?
Oh, shoot. I know which mon he did bring.
There are 5 of them, so...
I know he brought Dusk Noir over... Was it
the MVP?
Weavile?
Yeah.
Ooh.
His other 5 that he's now brought for the past 3 weeks have been Azelf, Lender's T, Megamanectric, Umbreon, and Empoleon. Now, I don't know what to think about that. Maybe it's just it was his best options. I just think that it pretty much puts him down at the bottom. I can't really look past that. You look at the other coaches, and they've all have had diverse teams each week. There's never been really the same 3 or so, maybe 4 each week, and we're seeing Mulvone bring 5 of 6 for 3 weeks now, and I'm not really buying that. He brought more balance this week, which I thought was cool, considering that hyper offense maybe isn't really working as well as he might have thought. And I just think that he went in with kind of not really as much of a plan as George did. Kelly?
I don't really have much else to add on to that. I think the one thing that really just got to me the most was the fact that he brought a counter to Mega Lopunny in Dusk Noir, which is not really a counter because it still loses like 40%, and its most reliable recovery is Leftovers and like Pain Split. So I don't really think that was very smart to bring. But aside from that, there's not much I can really say.
That or just, Wisping, but Wisping is so obvious.
Yeah, exactly. And then you could just switch out into something like your Gastrodon or whatever.
So moving on from there, we'll talk about Steve and the Milwaukee Sawsbucks.
So one thing I want to say about Steve right off the bat is that this season is not like any other past season. Yes, he does have a similar record. Yes, he is making some of the similar mistakes. However, whenever you look at the way he's been building, Koba Berry Conkeldurr, yes, I think it wasn't the best idea to have something that only did 60% to the Talonflame. However, that is something that he would not have had the confidence to run in past seasons. So he is building on his knowledge for team building. It is just the fact that everybody else is also gaining in this competitive scene and is just getting so much more competitive with everybody else that Steve is struggling to keep up. Do I think he's bad at the game? No. Do I think he's bad in the format? Not at all. I think he has a lot of potential, and I think that the second that he realizes he has more potential than what he's using, he will skyrocket. It's just the fact that he needs to actually think about every little thing before he decides to make a certain set or make a certain move. I think that he needs to grow along with everybody else, and I think he's scared to grow. It almost seems like, because he wants to keep doing something that he's comfortable with. It's just not working.
I think I could agree with that, although the whole growing thing, I think he can play with the big boys this year in the GBA. It's just he just falls short in very minimal ways. Funny enough, I actually liked the Koba Berry on the Conkeldurr. Now, we're talking about a team that has 2 different direct checks to a Talonflame, right? So, yeah, okay, Steve lost those 2 very early on, didn't quite necessarily do what he wanted them to do in terms of checking Smogon Bird. But the final kind of crux, and this is something that other people would consider an oversight, but Conkeldurr, if it had Rock Slide, would have been the win for Steve, because he would have survived the Brave Bird from Gubs. He would run for Rock Slide, assuming he hit. I mean, obviously Stone Edge, we're not going to go with that because of the accuracy. Rock Slide, if you want to go even safer, Rock Tomb. But the Rock Slide would have definitely KO'd the Talonflame, let's be honest. And then all Gubs had was Snorlax left. So I think Koba Berry did in fact work. I think it was a fantastic idea, and I just think that what fell short, and just Steve's only shortcoming, was the fact that he thought he would have rocks up and keep rocks up. Now, that was never guaranteed, especially against a coach like Gubbs. Steve recognized that he needed Stealth Rocks to be up in order to get the KO with Ice Punch. Now, Ice Punch was obviously multifaceted for Gliscor, and I guess my other thing too is, hey, AV, Rotom Wash, and Sucker Punch obviously worked. It was also intended for Mega Alakazam, as I kind of learned before he had battled with Gubbs, but it knocking out something like Thunderous T very early on, super effective. I loved it. I think it was a fantastic play. I like that type of innovation that he dug that deep into Rotom's move pool. Finally, Haxorus for me, on Steve's team, it's falling short, man. It really is. It's like Jimmy Graham on the Seahawks. It's not working, and I want to see it work. The fact that it doesn't have a fire move, and the coach that he's taken on so far have had steel type Mons, is a problem. But I do think that Steve, so far, the way he's using Haxorus or innovating, trying to fit it in, it's good. Maybe look, you have other offensive Mons. See what might work a little more, or just use it to just like choice band, punch holes, or lead with it, whatever. So far, though, I think Steve is continuing to develop the way he should be.
Yeah, and a couple things I want to say real quick about Stealth Rocks. I know a lot of people do calcs before the game, and I know a lot of coaches also calc things with Stealth Rocks up. I don't understand why they calc stuff with hazards, Stealth Rocks, spikes, what have you. I don't understand it because you're never guaranteed to always have them up. Do them without the hazards, and then when you have the hazards up, it makes the kill that much easier to get and that much more safe. So, just like my opinion for everybody, not just Steve. I also think that Steve, while yes, he is progressing the way I think he should, talk to other people that you normally don't talk to for team building. Like, if you talk to somebody, change it up every now and then, because sometimes whenever you talk to one person, you get stuck in their mindset and the way they see things. But whenever you talk to multiple people, it really does help give you insight on teams, and it can really help. That's just my opinion, though. Do you want to go ahead and move on? So coming in at number 14, we have the Detroit Steel Wings, and I know the first thing that everybody is going to say is, why did he bring offensive Audino? Okay, I know why he did it. I see why he did it. What I don't understand is the moves behind it. I get Psychic for Weezing. I get Low Kick for Tyranitar. Why did he not have Ice Beam for Garchomp? Its move pool is very vast, but its stats are so abysmal that why would you lack something that is a 4 times effective move? Because I did this calc to Fizz's Garchomp set with 168 in HP, a naive max special attack Audino. Ice Beam does 72 to 86%. So ultimately, that one move could have saved him the game, because that meant that Garchomp wouldn't have gotten behind the sub, it wouldn't have gotten to stay behind the sub, it wouldn't have gotten to set up to +6, and it wouldn't have gotten to run shop through Crimson's team. There was just some things there that I think Crimson needs to look into before he makes a certain set. With the Dusclops, I understand the counter. Why did you go for it? It was very obvious that he was going to sub, because whenever you can look at a mon and know that it can get off 51 HP substitutes, why would it stay in an attack when it doesn't have to? So revealing the counter honestly could have been a very bad play if you had saved it for later on in the match, but that's just my opinion. Despite all of the things that I think went wrong with Audino and what you did with Dusclops with counter, I think that your team preparation is actually getting much better. Like, quick attack on Staraptor, I think was amazing. Choice Scarf, Infernape for this match, I think was really good. There was just a lot in this match that I think really helped you out. I can kind of see other sets working, but I really think that the team prep is getting a lot better throughout the season.
I think Crimson so far, the Audino was certainly, it was effective to an extent. I think that maybe not having knockoff, like you said, over Ice Beam would have been a better bring. Flamethrower, then, well, like you said, Psychic and Low Kick. All of which I think would have been a little more effective than the set that he had brought. I like his intentions behind Audino, because he did want to create, as he said in his team builder, offensive pressure. But 60-60 and its offensive stats are not the most threatening. But it did kind of throw Fizzy off initially, and then when he kind of learned that it wasn't just, it was AV and offensive, Fizzy kind of adapted back on track, didn't let it really throw him off his game. But from there, I feel like Crimson lost at team preview because it just seems like his team just kind of fell short to what Fizz had brought, even though I think he did suspect a lot of what Fizz had brought to the match. There was like very few things that I could really pick on, like you said already about the counter. Why did he go for it when sub was very obvious? Because if Fizzy didn't go for sub with Garchomp, then a Willis was incoming, and that means burn Garchomp, and it wasn't obviously going to sweep as well. Not only that, but I think just the way that Crimson has been using Dusclops is kind of the same. Dusclops, Chansey, and Blissey are all the same thing. 2 words: setup fodder. That's kind of the bottom line. They really only have 2 options in terms of effective damage, being Seismic Toss or Nightshade. So, because of that, you know, as we've seen Fizz do, as we've seen Nick do, 51 HP subs, and let's tear shit up. That's pretty much how that works. So, Crimson, the way that he used Dusclops, bringing it in so obviously, going for Seismic Toss so obviously, once Fizz got behind the sub, and once that Seismic Toss didn't break the sub, in his mind, the same thing that Nips did, which we'll talk about in a little bit, was, oh shit. And that was where he lost it. I will say, yeah, basically. I will say that, for the most part, I think Crimson's special defensive Latios was a success. And I say that because Fizz's mindset was a little bit differently when he knew that Latios had Thunder Wave. If he had just, you know, went for an offensive move, or was an offensive Latios, Fizz would have just been like, okay, cool, T-Tar's coming in, thank you, goodbye, you know, and pull the Fizzy special against him, which is the Pursuit Trapping. So I think props to Crimson on that, and yes, he's developing, yes, there's some still minor issues, but he's moving in the right direction. Same thing with Steve. The little things is what is losing them games, but, you know, hopefully they'll patch that up as these next weeks go along.
And one thing that I'm also noticing between these 2 coaches that we just talked about, between Crimson and Steve, the fact that they're both recognizing their mistakes, and that's something that we can't really take away from them. Like, they're doing well at recognizing what they're doing wrong. It's just the way they're trying to go around fixing it is a little off. So,
I mean, not to mention that every commenter is also pointing out their mistakes too.
Exactly.
So that doesn't help. So get better or get scrutinized, basically.
Exactly.
So this is our first 3 deviations. We will talk first about number 13. I have the Arizona Deoxys. Now Gubbs won this week. He's finally on the board. But you might be wondering, why is he so low? Well, the teams above him, I think, are a little bit better because, you know, you have someone like the Long Island Rockies, which I cannot put him above because Nips did push his stuff in. And then I think that other coaches like the Pittsburgh Piratas and Top are just that much better. Gubbs still needs to shake off the rust. That's the bottom line. Yes, he's on the board, but there's a long way to go from here. You can't just call one win a victory for the season. And I'm sure he gets that, but I'm just making that abundantly clear. I like how Gubbs used his walls this week. I like how he had Liquid Ooze on his Tentacruel because he recognized that Steve going for Drain Punch would have meant that he would take residual damage on top of just, you know, it not being that effective against Tentacruel. And it's nice to see that ability be used effectively in the GBA because we don't see that much, to be honest. In addition, I think his counter Escavalier was very nice. The fact that I was able to take the hit so close to the bone, you know, with that, I think, like 12 or 16 HP left at a +2 Earthquake, but then go back and counter the Hacksters right in the face, it was awesome. It was a very solid match by Gubbs. The small critiques were that he did let Thunderous T get tricked and killed by Sucker Punch Rotom Wash, but that was, of course, props to Steve. And the fact that he said this, and I quote, "He has to be skill linked, there's no way he's Technician HP Ice." Gubbs, you almost fell for it. Twice. I swear to Aisha, if you fell for it twice, there would have been... Oh, man. If Steve was ballsy enough to click the HP Ice, which he had, because he was skill link, but with enough investment, I think, to hit and KO Gliscor with HP Ice after a Tail Slap, because it would do 5 hits of damage. Obviously, their DCs mildly affected that match, but that's kind of beyond the point. It was a solid move by Gubbs. He speed creeped the Gardevoir with Gliscor, and overall, just a solid match by Gubbs. Hopefully it continues this going.
Okay, so coming in at number 13, I have the Long Island Rockies and Nips, and the first thing that I want to point out is I don't understand why coaches in general, not just Nips, because we saw Gubbs do it, I've done it, and I'm sure you've done it. If you recognize a specific threat, why we let the threats just happen. Fizz did it to Crimson, Aggron did it to you, Manaphy has done it to me, and now Manaphy has also done it to Nips. Like, it's just, I don't understand why it's so hard to notice that we have a problem with a Pokemon on our team, but we just can't counter it. And I think that's one thing that I think everybody needs to get better with in general. The Gligar set, I don't understand it. I mean, I kind of understand Diggersby as well, but it's like he has a Steel type to take the returns decently well. He also has a Levitator in Cresselia. So unless you brought Life Orb with Agility to outspeed Manaphy, you weren't going to be doing a whole lot to this team. I also just really noticed that Chansey is just setup fodder for everything. As much as I love Chansey and Blissey and Fat stuff, it's just easy setup fodder. And that's one thing that everybody needs to be careful of, especially when it's setup fodder that doesn't have things like Haze, Dragon Tail, Roar, or anything like that. It's so easy to get set up on. I think that Nips needs to be a little bit more careful in his team preparations, because if he would take a little bit more time to notice, okay, maybe this isn't the best idea, let me explore other options, then maybe he would do better, like what he did against Gubbs. I think he has a potential to do that every single week. I don't really see him doing that every single week. You know what I mean? But that's basically my number 13 in the Long Island Rockies. I don't really have much else to say. I think Nips, he is playing better than he has in past seasons, and I'm really proud that he's doing better. It's just I want to see him actually shoot up to the top like I think he can, because I have a lot of faith in Nips.
You already said most of what I was going to say. Having EQ on Gligar, as he already said in his commentary, when Nick had 3 immune Mons, U-turn would have been the better bring, but it was also a necessary defogger, so I can appreciate that. Basically, Nips going for rocks and setting them up against Nick was what Nick needed to get Manaphians for free, and in doing that, that was his downfall, like you said. But 2 people this week had fallen for 52 or 51 HP subs, which facilitated Nick's sweep. It was predictable, but then again, that's Chansey for you. Besides that, you know, this was another week where I think Nips kind of overlooked the sub setup sweeper, week 1 being against John. It wasn't to such an extent where he had lost in the same way he lost to Nick this week, but I do think that still kind of holds the same premise. You know, he accounted sort of for Nick's Manaphy, but he also recognized that he didn't have much really to take on or KO Manaphy as effectively as he took on Gubbs last week. So besides that, we'll keep Nips down here, but I think he does have potential to keep moving up. Moving on from here, I'm going to talk about the Pittsburgh Piratatus at my number 12, and then we'll move into your number 12, number 11, which happens to be the Arizona Deoxys.
Sounds good.
So with Tup, I think that Tup fell short. That's pretty much the bottom line. He let Geo do what we've been wanting Geo to do for the past 2 weeks, and that was chip away, sweep. So Tup did have questionable plays. I think that early on, at first I was curious. I was like, why does he have Crunch on Arcanine? But then later on he clarified that it was for Latios, because, you know, having that switch in and maybe go for Draco Meteor against Arcanine, trying to pick it off, it was a good idea. And then not only that, but he did recognize later on that Kyurem, just regular Kyurem, did punch holes outside of Vaporeon and Blissey once that was out of the way. I think that was a good thing to recognize from this match specifically, because he does play Geo again, and Kyurem, I don't think has had its time to shine at all yet, and I think it's good that he's recognizing that now, because that means that he could bring it later and potentially get some really good offensive pressure that maybe he hasn't had so far. Tup not having Morning Sun or Recover on either of his walls, being Arcanine and Celebi, seemed very bizarre to me. He let the damage stack so much without recovery. I understand Morning Sun, obviously because of the sand being up, but Recover not on Celebi seemed a little interesting, especially because maybe he would have recognized how susceptible Celebi was against Geo in terms of Entei coming in, like a pincer, you know, even having Hippo with Crunch, not being able to recover that damage back, and not having a move like Giga Drain, and he had Seed Bomb instead. Maybe somewhat of an oversight. Something I will say, and this is something because I have insight on the sets that coaches do bring. Foul play is not as effective this season. I don't know if you noticed that, Kelly.
I did.
The coaches now are putting 0 attack IVs on all of their Mons where foul play can be super effective. That's really smart, by just in general by the coaches, because it ensures that foul play is pretty much a non-factor offensively. From there, I think as someone who, as someone who's used Arcanine, it wasn't the best idea to switch into the Choice Banded Entei with Stone Edge was gonna do 46 to 53%, I believe was the calc. So Arcanine was about around there, and I couldn't switch back out because of Stealth Rocks being up. But besides that, it was a very Wally match, very slow up until the exact turn where Geo brought in Mega Pinza for free on Tup's recover with Jellicent. And after that, I think that it's just, Geo just ran away with it. I think that Tup kind of forgot about Sand Force on Hippo, especially because it wasn't setting up Sand when it was coming in. That did effective and necessary damage against T-Tar and Celebi, which of course was unrecoverable, and eventually allowed Entei to clean up and just finish the match.
See, whenever I watched the game between Tup and Geo, I think that Tup had good intentions with the match, but just like everybody else, he kind of sort of suffered in team prep, in my opinion. Just like you said, the recover, like that's one thing that in team preparation is one thing that is just something that you cannot, having walls that don't have reliable recovery is not smart. I'm not saying that it was stupid of Tup, I'm just saying that that in general is not a smart idea to bring to a match. To be fair, if I didn't watch Geo's side of the match and know that he brought Sandforce Hippo, I wouldn't have thought about it either. I thought that was extremely, I don't want to say forgivable, but I can understand why Tup didn't think about that. I think that Tup went into this match, I don't want to say not scared, but I think he went in with a little bit more confidence against Geo than what was expected, because Geo is very good, and with a super Wally team, it is hard to break down, especially whenever Tup's team, while yes, it is full of offensive threats, they're not the type of offensive threats that match up super well. Also, you mentioned that Kyurem punched holes through the walls on Geo's team, aside from Vaporeon and Blissey. This is false. The only thing that really stops it is Vaporeon, because as a Life Orb attacker, it is very strong on the physical side, and all Tup would have had to do was run Outrage. And I believe it two-shots Blissey, because I did the calc whenever I used Kyurem in the PPL, and I believe it two-shots.
Or Dragon Claw if he doesn't want to be locked into Outrage in case of Aromatisse being brought.
Exactly. So I think that the Kyurem not being brought was kind of more of a hindrance to Tup than what he thinks, and I also think that it was more of a blessing to Geo, because if he had brought Kyurem, Geo would have had a much harder time this entire match. Like you said, with the baton passing into the Stone Edge from Celebi to Arcanine, be careful, because whenever you switch a Pokemon in knowing that it can take a super effective hit, no matter what, it's going to take big damage. Like, a super effective hit is a super effective hit. No matter what it is, no matter to what wall, it's still going to do more than what you want to your designated wall. So, I think Tup, he's going to bounce back. The holidays were a thing. I can be lenient. Just don't do it again, Tup. I know you can do better than this.
Well, hopefully he does bounce back. He takes on Crimson, another team that will be discussed in the Pick'em show. Go watch that.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
So coming into my number 11, since we just talked about your number 11, I have the Arizona Deoxys. Now, I have them a little bit higher than you do. Here's why. The entire season, we knew he could prep like this. The entire season, we knew that he could prep with interesting things like Counterous Cavalier, Liquid Ooze, Tentacruel, everything like this that just is finally coming out. It's like, it is about damn time. Thank you. Everything that he did this game just kind of made sense to me. The only thing I can say is, with the Technician, Hidden Power Ice, just never fall for hidden powers. Like 4 times weak walls. George actually said it in his video, and he said, I'm starting to realize why 4 times weak walls aren't the best. Here's why. 4 times effective moves are just so easy to slap on and do so much damage. The Sucker Punch Rotom Wash to kill the Thundurus. How was he to expect that? Like, honestly. Did anybody else see it coming? Did you, Tom? No.
Yes.
No, you did. No, you didn't. No, you... Shut up. No, you didn't. I know for a fact I didn't. I think that he went into this match with a lot more confidence than he has in the past games, and I think that even though he lost 6-0, that kind of sort of gave him the motivation to bounce back. And I really liked his attitude this week going into the whole thing. I loved the Snorlax set. I really like the Snorlax set. I think that Heavy Slam to hit Mega Gardevoir was very smart. I thought the EV spread on it was perfect. Like he goes so in depth with his EV spreads that it really, really impresses me. Talonflame set was perfect. I would have liked to see him not go for U-turn whenever he went for Brave Bird the first time, because it kind of sort of could have bluffed the band a little bit to then later on in the match to reveal that he's not banded and throw Steve for a little bit of a loop. But that's just my opinion. Overall, though, I think Gubbs played fantastically, and I hope that he keeps playing fantastically, because I want to move him up higher than the bottom 6.
Well, to be fair, I knew about Sucker Punch Roto mostly because I do my research about move pools, and also I think that Steve wasn't...
And you gent the team.
Yeah, but before that, I knew that because I did use a Rotom before. Moving on from there, we're going to go back into our same slots for at least the next 3 or so. But we have the San Francisco Giants, who we just talked about its opponent. Now, Gio did, like I said, an incredible job in chipping away from Tufts' walls and then cleaning up later on. He finally brought up Mungus, and I was so happy that he did so. It was a great check against Tufts' walls, especially against things like Jellicent, because Jellicent pretty much had 0 answers to take on Mungus, and AV with the 4 moves that he had brought was a great idea because it ensured that he got off necessary damage. However, I think he should start accounting later on for foul play, especially against the guys who do in fact put 0 attack IVs like I had mentioned before. If nothing else, Gio did take his time, especially with Ditto, to learn his opponent's sets. You saw that with how he impostered the Celebi and the Jellicent, if I recall. So he knew both those moves, and even so, the Jellicent, he had 3 of the 4 moves written down, and when he transformed, he knew the 4th. But just the way he does that, it was effective, and if nothing else, learning the opponent's full set is certainly very helpful for someone like Gio. The way he let Mungus die later on in the match was good because he had a lot of answers for Celebi. The fact that he didn't handcuff himself to getting swept by Tup's offensive superstar with bringing the Sand Force instead of Sand Stream Hippowdon was very smart because he got off, like I said, the big damage, and in doing so, he then ensured that the Ditto came in and then outpaced because it was scarfed against the Exegro. So I like those 2 in tandem, and I think that against Tup this week, he did a fantastic job.
See, with Gio, I honestly just bring a Mungus and you win. I think that's been proven, right? Right, Tom? That's proven now, right?
He's 1-0 when he brings a Mungus.
Bring a Mungus, you win. This match was honestly very, very wallish, very, very, I don't want to say stally, but...
It was Wally.
Oh my god, Tom, no, leave the puns to me. Gio played very well. I've said before that he is using Ditto very well this season. Last season he had it, and I think he learned how to use it, and this season he's executing it. Get it? Execute. Pokemon. Okay. So another thing that I want to add on was his Vaporeon set. I mentioned last week my dislike for weakness policies and stuff like that. I'm going to say it again. I don't really think that weakness policy was the best answer or was the best thing to bring. However, do what you want, I guess, is the best way to put it, because he didn't need leftovers, didn't need anything else. My honest opinion would have been to put Rocky Helmet on it so you could wear down the Arcanine more whenever he goes for Flare Blitz, so he would take Recoil and Rocky Helmet, and I think that would have been a little bit better. But I think that the Hippowdon set was perfect. He played very well. He made the necessary predictions when he had to, and the necessary switches when he had to. There's not really much I can say, and the fact that Gio is finally starting to play the way we saw him play towards the end of the season, and that he's picking up, it makes me really happy. Good job, Gio.
So moving on, we have Hayden, a newcomer. Now, if you guys watched the Pick and Crew, we did have a discussion between Makati and I where we did say that it's the newcomer versus the champ. And we did see that Hayden kind of got played. Not in a bad sense necessarily. It's just, it was maybe kind of an eye-opener. Maybe see, like... So we obviously saw that Hayden lost to Miguel. And maybe this was more like a realism game, kind of to pinpoint exactly where you are in comparison to the guy who did in fact win the GBA last season. I'm not taking away that he didn't play well. He played well overall. He was capable of taking on Miguel to an extent. However, I just think Miguel had the better plan overall, and obviously his Mega Altaria and the way that he just picked apart his walls one by one were just very effective. I think that the holidays clearly affected Hayden, as he did say in his commentary, and the lesser planning maybe got to him. But Miguel matched up very nicely, and it was a solid effort. One thing I will say, the one little nitpick, is that he didn't have Stone Edge on the Rock Polished Torterra. Maybe next time, have Dual Stab and Stone Edge, because that would have, in fact, been able to take on things like Zapdos and even Mega Altaria, pre-Mega Evolution, of course. But it was somewhat of an oversight, and I think he'll prep next time a little better. This was a good, like I said, a realism game, solid effort by the new guy, and let's see where he goes from here.
See, where you said that Hayden played well, I mean, if I'm just 100% honest, not to sound really harsh on Hayden, because you guys know I was the biggest fan of Hayden at the beginning of the season. I still am. I don't really think he played very well. I don't think he played to his best ability, especially showing the way he has played this season. I think there was something off about him. What it was, I'm not really sure. Nor do I really... It was probably Thanksgiving, yeah, but honestly, he just didn't play the way Hayden plays. And I think he'll bounce back from it in a heartbeat. I don't think that this was anything permanent. However, one thing that now people have seen that work effectively against him is leading off with a fairy to force Magic Bounce to not work. So maybe run Fake Out on Mega Sableye to guarantee your Mega Evolution so they can't get hazards up. Things like that I think he'll end up thinking about throughout the season. And the hacks really sucked this game. I mean, they really sucked. I don't know how game-changing they were, but they sucked in general because there was just so much hacks between the full paras, the crit on the Mega Altaria. There was just a lot of hacks in general, and I hate hacking matches. I don't think they're really necessary unless you're using a Jirachi, then they're 110% necessary. But Hayden will bounce back. I have a lot of faith in Hayden. Good luck next week, bro. So coming in at number 8 is the New York Yankees. Last week I was very hard on Shady. I do apologize if I came off. I don't know how to word this without making me sound like the way I was. I didn't mean to come off as an asshole. It's just the fact that I have a lot of faith in Shady. I like the way Shady team builds and the way he plays. So to see him do some stuff that just really bothered me, it kind of got to me. I do apologize. I'm human. However, this week is the Shady that I liked. Yes, he lost. However, look at the huge picture in this match. He played against John, somebody who has made it to playoffs. He was the favorite to win. He is one of the more threatening players in the GBA while being slept on at the same time. And he played fantastically. He didn't want to reveal play rough too early because he wanted to make sure that some stuff was a secret. He U-turned every single time he should have. I think his team building was a little bit off with the Sharpedo set, but aside from that, he made the perfect doubles. He made good predictions. This was the type of Shady that I enjoy watching. Somebody who takes his time, thinks about his sets, thinks about amazing moves that he could use. And it's like, this is the type of Shady that can make it to playoffs. The type of Shady that can win in playoffs. The type of Shady that might actually have a shot at making the finals. Like, this Shady was perfect. I loved watching it. Yes, he did lose. But you got to look at the big picture in games like this.
I will agree with you. I think the player of Jirachi was a nice touch. I'm glad he saved it because, as he recognized himself, he did say that the player of Jirachi, even though it did take out Hydreigon, wasn't necessarily what he needed to go for the first time when he did face off against Hydreigon. I will talk a little more about the Sharpedo, and he also recognizes himself, so I'm just going to kind of touch over what exactly might have gone through his mind. Shady needed the Earthquake for Raikou and Lantern, but then he also needed the Waterfall for hard-hitting stab, at least one of which, and then Ice Fang for Hydreigon and things of that nature. If he had forewent any of those 3 moves, you would have kind of figured out what Mon John could have had brought in and walled a Sharpedo. If he didn't bring the Ice Fang, Hydreigon walled him. If he didn't bring the Earthquake, then Lantern and Raikou walled him. And then finally, he needed the water stab to take on Florges, because if he just had Crunch, then John could just stay in Moonblast, Protect, Wish, what have you. So I say that just to kind of give you an idea. Maybe it wasn't readily apparent enough in his breakdown. I hope it was, but I do see what Shady was doing. I do also see the conundrum in which he was faced. He needed to... He needed those moves specifically, but he also needed Crunch. Obviously, as big of a threat as Uniclus was, not having Crunch was an oversight. He'll readjust. I know it. I know he will. And next time, you know, he won't have as big of a problem when it comes to taking on John and just in general.
I want to take a second to say that I was 100% wrong about Sharpedo. Like, I said that it was a bad pick in the draft rankings. I was 110% wrong. He has been proving me wrong since the first time he brought it, so kudos on that.
Sharpedo is not a bad pick at all on his team. And I say so because he has the walls around it to complement it, because when the walls are just being effective, all Sharpedo has to do is just pick off when Amon is weakened enough by his walls.
There are just a couple things that I want to say about his plays in general. I do think that sacking off his Alakazam just to see if his Reuniqueless had Shadow Ball might not have been the best play, because he kind of had to bring Shadow Ball. Otherwise, Alakazam could beat it 1v1 if it had like sub Calm Mind and things like that. He needed to have Shadow Ball.
You see, I disagree, because I think it was smart for him to understand that Reuniqueless is set sooner rather than later, because then at least he could have built some sort of offensive plan to take on something that he had in fact recognized was such a big threat to his team.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see both sides of it. I really can. It's just, whenever you look at Reuniqueless, what does it mainly do? Calm Minds, recovers, kills. Now, if Shady had brought a sub-Calm Mind Alakazam, which we saw Mighty Mamoswine do in the playoffs of the D-League, and it worked pretty well. And wait, you did it too?
I did it back in Season 3 against John. Go figure. I used it to get rid of his Starmie.
See, that's just it. Like, sub-Calm Mind, regular Alakazam could actually have worked to counter that pretty decently, so it was kind of obvious that he had to have Shadow Ball. Another thing is, just for general knowledge, Calm Mind Reuniqueless normally runs Magic Guard just so it doesn't get worn down by Toxic Burn, things of that nature. And he almost pulled a Nips with the Sharpedo versus Donphan. He almost did it, but he didn't. Whenever he went for Waterfall and he was about to go for Ice Fang, predicting, and he almost over-predicted, but he went for Waterfall instead. Just slow down just a little tiny bit, but other than those like few minor things, there's not much really that he did wrong. It was a fantastic game.
I honestly think he should have went full dirtbag at the end and go for all those Iron Hand flinches, or even just the first time that Reuniqueless was in. And now, guys, relax. I'm not calling him a dirtbag. I'm saying that, you know, if you're like that type guy that does like the para flinching with Togekiss or para flinching with Jirachi, I hate you. But I think he should have did it, because I think that was his best chance to win. And
I did that for 3 games in the PPL and won because of it, so thank you very much.
I think, you know what? I think it would have been, you know, it's the GBA, man. A lot of coaches say...
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Gotta do what you gotta do. If that means, you know, let's Toxic Stall and, you know, make you have like a brain aneurysm, why not?
You gotta do what you gotta do. I think that this was probably my favorite match of the week, if I'm just being 100% honest. I'm
gonna say Fizz's match, because I like watching Fizz's side the most.
Good old Fizzy Stardust.
Good old Fizzy Stardust. We're not talking.
You want to go ahead and move on to number 7?
Yeah. Now we will talk about his opponent, being John the New Orleans Pelicans. We both have him at number 7. For him, I think what John did, recognizing that not only was Reuniqueless a win condition, not only did it do massive damage, and not only did he had to recognize that Sharpedo, once it didn't have Crunch, was pretty much like his real means of taking down all of Shady's team, not just like bits and pieces, but pretty much the entire thing. Was very smart. I think that John, this was a great match, like you just said. This was your favorite match. I think John's planning was absolutely immaculate. He was worried that Shadow Ball wouldn't hit Sharpedo hard enough, but come on, it's Sharpedo. Like, Water Gun hit Sharpedo hard. We're just being honest here. He did leave Reuniqueless in a little too early. Potentially got flinched to death with Jirachi. It was, you know, he could recover. Obviously, we saw that, and so it wasn't the biggest deal. But course, it was a little reckless, and John can't do that sometimes. Solid doubles by him from floor, just predicting Jirachi into Donphan to get rocks up in a very easy fashion. I was almost concerned when he let Hydreigon take big damage from a U-turn, which I thought was dumb at first. Then when he went for Roost, I was completely negated that thought, so good on him. And both coaches, just in general, made fantastic switches. John going from Donphan, predicting Jirachi, or going to Hydreigon against Jirachi. You know, it's... These coaches, man, were just on point the entire match. When Sharpedo got KO'd, John had locked up the match with Reuniclus, barring any crits, and just the way that he picked apart what mons were necessary at the end of the match and what mons weren't in order to lock up the win was fantastic. I commend John on this win, and I hope he keeps this planning up and that nothing really gets in his way from here on.
I just wanted to say that Hydreigon set, it was amazing. It was perfect. I loved it. The charge beam to boost a special attack, I think that's amazing. I've used Work Up Hydreigon to get a special attack boost because it just destroys lives along with Roost. It was fantastic. Staying in with his Hydreigon against the Jirachi was very risky. I don't understand why he did it. However, it worked out. Also, scouting the moves on Sharpedo was very smart of John to do. It essentially won him the game once he knew that it didn't have crunch. So I think John played fantastically. I think Shady played fantastically. This was the best game of the week in my opinion. I can't say it enough. It was fantastic, and I'm excited to see more games like this throughout the season.
Moving on to number 6. Our number 6 and number 5 are switched, of course. Leading off, we have Miguel. Miguel's prep and play is finally back on track. Clearly, he was in control the entire time. It was nice seeing him bring Body Slam Mega Altaria. Very interesting dive into that move pool, especially because Body Slam is a Fire Red Leaf Green move, back all the way from Gen 3. Now he wasn't necessarily hoping for hacks, as we heard in his commentary. It was his best option over something like Return or Double Edge. He didn't get the recoil and Return, maybe not the time necessarily like, oh, I have a Return on and get this happiness up, because trading is a bitch sometimes. Thank you, Waffles. It was a great prediction by Miguel for going for the Reckless Wild Charge over the Fire move, predicting Slowbro to come in, because that pretty much just took Slowbro all the way out of the picture for Hayden. Disregarding the crit, it was toxic, and Reckless Wild Charge is nothing to be fucked with. The way that Miguel facilitated getting toxic spikes up, you know, forcing Sableye to switch out, bringing Dragalge in, getting the toxic spikes up, was class act amazing. That was fantastic. It was easy setup. As he said, Hayden had no way of getting rid of the toxic spikes, and once he defogged, he didn't need him anymore because all the things that were grounded were already toxic thanks to those toxic spikes. Miguel understands how to beat the players that are predictable. He understands how to beat guys like Hayden, even Lars, John, Shady. Dan is really his only kryptonite. This was a great win. All coaches take notes though. Miguel said it right. He said that in order to beat Hayden, you need fast wall breakers, not just, you know, walls on walls, switches, stuff like that. You need to hit him hard, hit him fast, break the walls sooner rather than later so that Hayden can't get the upper hand and chip away from you first. So it was a good job at the end, Miguel cleaning up with Mega Altaria, and it was very fortunate that he heel belled through the paras. Overall, I hope Miguel stays the way he played this match for every match.
So my number 6, I have George. I don't really have a whole lot to say about George. He came in, he had a plan, he won. He played amazingly. Like there's really nothing I can say he did wrong or did fantastically good. He was George. So I'm just going to go ahead and move on to my number 5, which was also Miguel in the Real Maril. There was not a single turn in this match that Miguel did not predict. Not a single turn. He said in his team builder, leading off with Mega Altaria, scare out Mega Sableye, then get up Toxic Spikes, poison everything. Or hopefully paralyze the Clefable so I can set up on it with Mega Altaria. I plan to predict the Slowbro switch in to Emboar and Wild Charge and 2-hit KO it after it is poisoned. Nothing in this entire match Miguel did not plan. He played this game like 4 times in his head and then played it on his game. That was amazing preparation, that was amazing thought process, amazing team building. And one thing that I noticed he said in his team builder, he said, I could not bring Greninja because it lacks the power without Protean. That's what I was worried about with Greninja at the beginning of the season. but maybe it was just this match because Hayden's team is extremely fat. Who the heck knows?
It's a shame that Miguel had to run Hidden Power Flying because Electric Bird doesn't get Air Slash, doesn't get Hurricane. Go figure, it gets Air Cutter. So, that makes sense, right, guys? Right, go Game Freak. So, basically, my notes on George is that he had a plan, he executed effectively. He had a great plan with Superpower for the Umbreon, same way he did back in the D-League. And Scarf Scissor, which I can attest, does in fact work. That set was very necessary from a Bones team considering how fast it is and just how hard Technician Bullet Punch is going to hit even without a band or a life orb. George is in control. He sustained constant pressure and chip damage against the entirety of a Bones team. And he brought in Crawdon right when he needed to sweep. He knew he could live the Earthquake from a Scarfed Landorus T. He ensured that he could pick up a KO, and he did so. And I commend him for that. The team was pretty much entirely in George's favor. I don't really see a time when Mobone had, a point to take control. I mean, George kind of said that, when Goodra was getting low and it was toxic, he was unsure if he still maintained momentum, but that wasn't really the biggest thing to me. He just, he played well, and that's pretty much what I expect from George. From there, we have our top 4.
And our top 4 are the same, correct?
Yes, they are. So from here on, we're just going to be the same. Borussia Donphan, Lars, the only team that I was the only one to predict against Lars and go with Dan this week. Lars, he fell short, and the main reason I think is sacking off Azumarill very early on. Yeah, could have been predicting HP Fire, was predicting the Wish in reality, but still putting one of your premier sweepers in jeopardy, not the smartest move. It was a huge sweeper that took heavy damage, and in doing so had to be sacked off against that Specs Sylveon, and that pretty much I think lost him the match because he wasn't really from there able to sustain offensive pressure. He wasn't able to get back in the same spot that he was after losing Azumarill. He just didn't really play effectively. I think for lack of a better way to describe it, he fell for what Miguel fell for. He tried to get too deep into Dan's head. He allowed Mega Absol to take big damage. Obviously the Cobra Berry set was very smart, but he expected way too much out of Dan. He tried to get too cheeky, too over-predicty. He's gonna have the same problem that Miguel has. You can't play Dan the same way you play other players. Dan is not the same competitor. He's unique and he's effective. That's it.
He even said in his commentary that he had trouble predicting Dan. Like, it's impossible. Like, Dan is not a regular player. Dan is Dan. That's just it. I think that Dan had a fantastic team going into this with the offensive Sylveon. I loved that set. The fact that Lars let his Azumarill get weakened very quickly, like you said, probably costed him the game in general, and he probably should have tried to expect the offensive Sylveon, because even switching it into a non-offensive Sylveon still would have hurt quite a lot. Whenever he let his Crobat take a lot of damage from the final Gambit at the beginning, I think that he could have gained a lot of momentum from that, and he didn't. I think that he could have really took charge of the game. The second that he knew he was up 6-5, he could have done a lot. He could have roosted, U-turned, gone right into Azumarill, done damage, bam, and it could have been awesome. But I just think he got a little too worried about what was going to happen and trying to predict for things like that to actually take into account. He'll bounce back though. It's Lars. It's one loss. It's against the one person that has already beaten the champ from last season. I wouldn't take it to heart, honestly. Dan's just awesome.
I agree. And we'll move on to talking about Dan, considering that he's both our number 3s. I think Dan's Smeargle set was fantastic. You might not agree so much so, but I think that him going for Final Gambit, it was multi-purposed, because he had Final Gambit to take out the Mega Absol right off the bat, and assuming that Lars had led with it, or he went for Dark Void, and since he was Scarf, he would outpace the Taunt from Crobat and put it to sleep. Now, both obviously would have been very effective. The Final Gambit, he recognized, kind of hampers momentum, and then going and then switching out, going for the Toxic those few times, kind of put him in a little bit on the back foot, but obviously he did recover. He recovered very well. Dan did a great job just putting constant, effective pressure against Lars, and it was a big part of his winning strategy. Lars had very limited walls to all of Dan's offense, being Sylveon and Victini, because those two were just obviously very dominating. Now, it's funny that Dan misses so many Toxics because he gets so many freezes at will. I just think that's... What a trade-off, man. Just in general, Dan did a great job overall. He maintained good matchups, he stayed in control all match, and he took down someone that a lot of people expected to beat him, being Lars. So, obviously, they go at it again, as all of these coaches do. So, we look forward to that. But just overall, it was a fantastic match, and I applaud Dan for the way that he prepped and the way that he won.
Yeah, I can say I don't like the Smeargle set, but in the end, it was effective. Like, that's the one thing I can say. If I dislike something, actually, I don't know if I could say how effective it was, because ultimately it could have lost him a lot of momentum. Like, whenever he was automatically down 6-5 first turn, that could have lost him a lot of momentum. As if Lars had, say, if he had roosted on the Mega Aggron and lived and then U-turned and gone into an offensive presence like his Landorus, expecting the Earthquake on the roost or something like that. Like, there were a lot of possibilities that Lars could have done to gain momentum, and I think that automatically killing it was a little bit of a, I don't want to say a bad call, but a questionable call. I think that if he had gone for Dark Void, now that would have been a great play to put something to sleep instantly, would have been awesome. His Victini, it was virtually useless because of all the Dragon Tails getting scented into rocks. Letting Victini take all that rocks damage wasn't really in Dan's control, but it sucks at the end. The fact that it still did a lot of damage at like 1 HP is awesome. I think that the score doesn't show how close of a match this was. Ultimately, it was a 3-0 with 3 Pokemon having below 20% of health. Like, that's just insane. They both played fantastically. Dan is just really, really good in general. It's not even that he's impressive. He's just good. So, good job, Dan. See you in the finals.
Man's going super bold. All right. We have our final 2, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for bearing with us. Number 2, Fizzy Stardust. Fizzy's not going to enjoy being at number 2. He is the man that wants to be number 1. He wants it. He's hungry. Especially one more week.
If he can get another pursuit kill, I will put him at number 1.
Can you promise that?
I promise you, Fizzy, if you get a pursuit kill next week, you will be number 1.
Well, that certainly is the Fizzy special, so I don't see any means of him not being able to do that. Okay, what did Fizzy do really well? It was
pursuit.
I'll get to that, damn it. But it was a good baton pass out by Fizz to keep the matchup in his favor versus the Raptor, and getting in Doughblade so easily. Like, Doughblade straight walled Staraptor. The pursuit, it wasn't a very obvious pursuit trapper, but, you know, we can obviously see that Doughblade and that whole line gets pursuit. And he ensured necessary damage against Staraptor upon U-turning, because obviously Crimson couldn't do anything else to it. Solid play by how we used Garchomp. Getting it in, knowing that the Dusclops was going to come in, having 51 HP subs, knowing what he needed to do in order to set up effectively, having Sandville, you cheeky motherfucker. You know, he just plays so well, and everything is just so thorough. You know, like I said, the Fizzy special, pursuit trapping, the Latios with T-Tar, easy. He just does such a good job when it comes to scouting. Figured out how Infernape was, whether or not it was Scarfed, same thing with Staraptor and Crocodile, all solid plays. Overall, you know, Fizzy at this level right now, this very second, he is my favorite for the finals. You might think Dan, I think Fizzy. I just think it's impeccable just how well he plays, and he's picking up, like a lot of people have been saying, where he left off back at the end of season 3.
Not only is he playing impeccably, but the way that he's using his Mons is fantastic. The way he's using Togekiss is perfect. He's using that thing so much better than I think I've seen anybody use Togekiss. He is using Tyranitar amazingly. He isn't forced into bringing Choice Banded Stoutland to be his main offensive presence. You can see that he's perfectly fine with using Setup Garchomp, Scarf Tyranitar. Like, there's so much that he's okay with doing. Like, he has no boundaries, and I love the way Fizz is going. He's another one of my favorites. It's really hard to pick right now. It's just, Fizz is so good. He's doing so well. Fizz is just one of those people that if you do not play perfectly, he will take advantage of the one little foothold that you give him, and he'll sweep you. And that's what I love about Fizz.
It's a good way to end it off. Now to really end it off, I just have one word for both our number ones, Manaphy.
And that is the Week 3 Power Rankings. Nick is just doing so well. The Manaphy set, I've been 6-0'd by a Manaphy. I know how it feels. It sucks. The way he's doing it is fantastic. I love it. He's doing perfectly with all of his mons. He's using Mega Audino perfectly, makes me proud. Cresselia, he's using amazingly. Skarmory, everything on his team. It's just, even Sneasel this week was awesome. Like, just good job, Nick. Keep it up. Just
I like how he didn't bring Manaphy in too early, because the potential T-Wave that he pretty much thought was kind of incoming, he ensured that didn't happen, because that would have obviously put a hamper on his sweep. It was very easy for him to set up Manaphy against Nips' team. All you can really say about that. But it's funny how the tables turn so quickly against Nips. You know, he goes from 6-0 sweeping Gubs last week to getting 5-0 swept this week. You know, that's the GBA for you. You know, it's your friend one week and it's stabbing you right in the back the next. So now that's the real ending to the power rankings. Of course, as always, thank you for lasting with us this long. If you just listened to your own team favorite, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate the views. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a comment as always. Thank you guys for watching. We will see you next week. Look forward to your comments and talking to you in the comments section. Not really. But with that being said, have a good day, everyone.
bye.